My name is Amber Michelle, and I'm 28 years old. Last Sunday, I walked into my parents' pristine Beacon Hill home for what I thought was a normal family dinner. Everything seemed fine until after dessert, when my father cleared his throat and delivered the ultimatum that would change everything. You have 2 days to get your stuff out of the lake house. We're selling it. My mother added, her voice cold, we're disappointed in your choices, Amber. The look in their eyes told me this wasn't just about real estate. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you've ever had family drama explode over dinner, and stay tuned for how I turned this crisis into the best thing that ever happened to me. To understand why my parents' ultimatum hit me like a wrecking ball, you need to know a bit about us. I'm a creative writing graduate who works remotely as a content creator for several digital publications and brands. It's not the most lucrative career, but it's fulfilling and gives me the freedom to write the novel I've been working on for the past 2 years. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Michelle, are what you might call Boston aristocracy. Dad built his reputation as one of the city's most cutthroat corporate attorneys, while Mom left her brief teaching career to become the perfect lawyer's wife, sitting on charity boards and hosting dinner parties where connections were made and maintained. Their world revolves around appearances, achievements they can brag about at the country club, and a very narrow definition of success. Growing up, our household operated like a well-oiled machine designed to produce high-achieving, socially acceptable children. My childhood memories are filled with extra tutoring, advanced placement courses, SAT prep starting in middle school, and constant reminders of what was expected of a Michelle. Michelles don't settle for B's, my father would say. Michelles Lee, they don't follow, my mother would remind me when I wanted to do something all my friends were doing. I was an obedient child, mostly. I got the grades, joined the right extracurriculars, and applied to the prestigious colleges my parents had selected. I even started pre-law at Boston University, making my father beam with pride at the thought of Michelle and daughter on his office door someday. But something happened during my sophomore year. I took a creative writing elective that was supposed to be an easy A, and instead, it awakened something in me. For the first time, I felt truly alive, expressing my thoughts and creating worlds on paper. I secretly changed my major to English literature with a creative writing concentration, only telling my parents after it was too late to switch back without delaying graduation. The day I told them, my father's face turned the color of the expensive Merlot he'd been drinking. Writing, he'd sputtered. What kind of career is that? Do you know how many English majors end up serving coffee? My mother had been more tactical. Sweetheart, that's a lovely hobby. But you need a real profession. Maybe you could still go to law school after graduation, or business school. They reluctantly supported me through the remainder of college, certain I would come to my senses. After graduation, they gave me what they called a grace period. I could stay in their lake house property in the Berkshires rent-free for a year while I got this writing business out of my system. 1 year turned into 3 as I built my freelance career. I wasn't living exclusively at the lake house. I had my own small apartment in Somerville, a neighborhood they considered questionable at best, but I spent weekends and writing retreats at the lake house when I needed quiet to work on bigger projects. Meanwhile, my younger brother Wesley followed the Michelle blueprint perfectly. He excelled in his pre-med program, got accepted to Harvard Medical School, and was now in his residency, specializing in cardiology. At family gatherings, the conversation always centered around Wesley's accomplishments, with perhaps a polite but brief inquiry about my little writing jobs. The tension had been building for years. Each family dinner featured some variation of, "When are you going to get a real job?" or "Your cousin Jennifer just made partner at her firm, isn't that wonderful?" 3 months ago, I signed a contract to write a series of travel articles for a major publication, a genuine breakthrough in my career, and when I shared the news, my mother had simply asked if it came with health insurance. Last week, I'd received an unusually formal text from my mother. "Your father and I would like you to join us for dinner on Sunday." Wesley will be there. Please dress appropriately. Something about the message had set off alarm bells, but I'd dismissed them. After all, what was the worst that could happen over roast beef and Yorkshire pudding? As it turns out, quite a lot. Sunday evening arrived with that peculiar golden light that makes Boston look like something out of a Fitzgerald novel. I parked my 10-year-old Honda Civic between my father's Mercedes and my brother's Audi, already feeling the familiar inadequacy creeping in. I'd made an effort with my appearance, wearing a navy blue dress that I knew my mother would find acceptable, though I'd paired it with ankle boots rather than the pumps she would have. The Michaud family home stood imposing as ever, a 4-story brownstone on one of Beacon Hill's most prestigious streets. I took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. In this house, one didn't simply walk in, even if you were family. My mother opened the door, perfectly coiffed and wearing a cashmere sweater set that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Amber, darling," she said, kissing near my cheek. "You look healthy." In Alina Michel's vocabulary, healthy was code for you could stand to lose 10 pounds. The house smelled of roasting meat and lemon polish. Everything gleamed, from the mahogany banister to the silver picture frames containing carefully curated family photos. I noticed most were of Wesley in his white coat, or my parents at charity functions. The few of me were at least 5 years old. Wesley was already in the living room, nursing a squash and looking uncomfortable. When he saw me, relief washed over his face. "Hey, Ams," he said, using my childhood nickname and giving me a quick hug. "Glad you're here." Something in his tone made me nervous, like he knew something I didn't. "Can I get you a glass of wine, Amber?" my father asked from the bar cart, his voice carefully neutral. "We've opened a nice Cabernet." "Yes, thank you," I said, accepting the glass he poured, noting he gave me significantly less than was in his own glass. "Just one though," my mother interjected. "You know how you get when you have too much." I didn't, actually, since I'd never been drunk in front of my parents in my life, but correcting her would only start an argument before we'd even sat down. The small talk was excruciating. My mother commented on the weather, my father discussed a case he'd recently won, and Wesley talked about a cardiac procedure he'd observed. When I mentioned an article I'd written about sustainable businesses in New England, my mother quickly pivoted to asking Wesley about a doctor he was apparently dating. "So, Amber," my father said as our appetizers arrived, some kind of complicated crab thing that probably took to prepare. "How is the content creation going?" He said the words as though they tasted bad. "It's going well, actually. I just signed another contract with—" "That's nice, dear," my mother interrupted. "Did I mention that Caroline Thompson's daughter just made junior partner at Goldman Sachs, and she's a year younger than you?" Wesley attempted to change the subject. "Dad, did you catch the Celtics game last night?" But my mother was like a heat-seeking missile. "Amber, I ran into your old roommate Stephanie at the benefit last week. She's expecting their second child. Her husband just bought them the most charming house in Wellesley." I pushed the crab around my plate. "That's nice. She asked about you, of course." I hardly knew what to say. "Oh, Amber, she's still figuring things out at your age. It's becoming rather embarrassing, darling." I felt my cheeks burning. "I'm not figuring things out, Mom. I have a career. It's just not the one you wanted for me." My father cleared his throat. "Let's save this discussion for after the main course, shall we?" The roast beef was perfectly cooked but might as well have been cardboard in my mouth. Throughout the main course, my mother made pointed comments about my appearance. "That hairstyle is certainly interesting, my dating life, whatever happened to that nice analyst you met at Wesley's graduation, and my apartment Somerville is becoming less dangerous than it used to be, I suppose." Wesley kept trying to steer the conversation to neutral territory, but it was like trying to stop a freight train with a feather. The tension built through each course, my father growing increasingly quiet while my mother became more animated, a sure sign that something was brewing. After dessert, a lemon tart that I barely tasted, my father set down his napkin with the precision of a man preparing for battle. The dining room suddenly felt airless. "Amber," he began, his attorney voice in full effect, Your mother and I have made a decision. We're selling the lake house. I blinked, surprised but not devastated. Oh well, that's your choice, of course. We'll need you to remove your belongings within the next 2 days. The realtor is bringing potential buyers on Wednesday. The timeline made me choke on my coffee. 2 days, Dad, I'm in the middle of several deadlines. I can't just drop everything too. We've indulged this writing phase of yours for far too long, my mother cut in. 3 years, Amber, 3 years we've provided you with free housing for your little writing retreats. And what do you have to show for it? I have a career, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. I pay my rent, I'm building something. Building what? My father demanded. A life of permanent mediocrity. You had such potential. We're not just selling the house, my mother added, her voice softening into something more dangerous than her anger. We've decided it's time for a clean break. No more safety net. My father nodded. You have 2 options. You can move back home and go to law school like you should have done years ago, and we'll support you through that. Or you can continue with this writing experiment, but entirely on your own. No more lake house. No more health insurance. No more car insurance payments. No more phone plan. No more safety net of any kind. The room spun slightly. I looked at Wesley, who was studying the tablecloth as though it contained the secrets of the universe. He'd known. He'd known and hadn't warned me. You're cutting me off, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Because I chose a different career than the one you wanted. We're helping you face reality, my mother said. Sometimes love means making tough choices. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. 3 years of tension had just crystallized into an ultimatum that would force me to choose between my authentic self and financial security. The silence around the table was deafening as they waited for my response, certain they had me cornered at last. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly in the silence. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I couldn't seem to form words as my mind raced through implications. They were really doing this. They were forcing me to choose between who I was and who they wanted me to be. My thoughts flashed back to my 16th birthday when they'd gifted me a leather briefcase instead of the camera I'd been hoping for. For your future law career, they'd said, as though my path had already been determined. Or the time my mother had edited a short story I'd written in high school, removing all the parts she found disturbing before I could submit it to a young writers' contest. Small controlling moments had built up over the years, but this was different. This was the nuclear option. You've been planning this, I said finally, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. For how long? My father shifted in his chair. That's hardly relevant. Did you know about this? I asked Wesley directly. He looked up, guilt written across his face. They told me last week. I tried to talk them out of it, Ams. Not very hard, apparently, I said, the betrayal stinging. Don't blame your brother, my mother snapped. He understands what you seem unable to grasp. Family expectations matter. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Can we talk about this rationally? I understand you're disappointed in my career choice, but I'm building something meaningful to me. My last article got over 100,000 reads, and the travel series I'm starting. Internet clicks are not a career, my father interrupted. Do you have a retirement plan? Healthcare that doesn't expire when you turn 30? Any semblance of stability? I'm working toward those things. I'm only 28, Dad. Not everyone has their entire life figured out before 30. That's precisely the problem, my mother said. This extended adolescence. In my day, 28-year-olds had families, mortgages, real responsibilities. I have real responsibilities, I countered, feeling my careful composure cracking. Just because they don't look like yours doesn't make them invalid. Enough, my father said, his palm hitting the table hard enough to make the crystal water glasses jump. The decision is made. You have 2 days to clear your things from the lake house. After that, you're either moving back home to pursue a sensible path, or you're completely on your own. This is insane, I said, looking between them. You're really willing to damage our relationship over this? My mother's eyes welled with tears, a tactical move I'd seen many times before. We're trying to save you from yourself, Amber. Someday you'll thank us. Like hell I will, I shot back, surprising myself with the vehemence. Watch your language in this house, my father warned. Or what, you'll cut me off? Oh wait, you're already doing that. Wesley finally spoke up. Everyone needs to calm down. There has to be a middle ground here. Stay out of this, Wesley, both my parents said in near unison. I pushed my chair back, hands shaking. So that's it, an ultimatum, abandon my dreams or be cut off completely. We prefer to see it as a loving course correction, my mother said. There's nothing loving about this. This is control, pure and simple. My father's face hardened. You know, your attitude is exactly why we've had to take these measures. You've always been stubborn, unwilling to listen to reason. Because your version of reason means I should just accept that your vision for my life matters more than my own. We have decades more experience than you, he countered. We've seen what happens to people who chase creative pipe dreams. They end up bitter, broke, and alone. Unlike the corporate lawyers who work 70 hours a week and have 3 ex-wives, I shot back, knowing I was hitting below the belt by referencing his partners at the firm. His face flushed with anger. That's enough, this conversation is over. 2 days, Amber. Then you decide grow up and come home or face the real world without our help. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. We're only doing what's best for you, darling. Someday, when you have children of your own, you'll understand. That was when something snapped inside me. If I ever have children, I said, my voice deadly calm, I will never, ever use financial manipulation to control their life choices. I will never confuse love with ownership. And I will certainly never ambush them at a family dinner with an ultimatum designed to break their spirit. I stood up, grabbing my purse from the back of my chair. I need to leave now. Amber, don't be dramatic, my mother said. Sit down and let's discuss this reasonably. There's nothing reasonable about what you're doing, I replied, already moving toward the foyer. If you walk out that door right now, my father called after me, you're making your choice. I paused at the threshold of the dining room, turning back to look at my family tableau one last time, my red-faced father, my tearful manipulative mother, my conflict-avoidant brother. No, I said quietly. You made the choice when you decided conditional love was the only kind you were capable of giving. The walk to the front door felt like miles. I could hear my mother calling after me, swishing tactics from tears to conciliatory tones, asking me to be reasonable and not make rash decisions. My father remained at the table, too proud to follow. Only Wesley came after me, cashing me on the front steps. Ams, wait. I turned, keys already in hand. What, Wesley, going to tell me to be reasonable too? He looked pained. No, I'm sorry, I should have warned you. Yeah, you should have, I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. Do you have a place to stay? Do you need money for the lake house move? I laughed bitterly. Now you want to help, after sitting there silently while they dropped their bomb. He had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't know how to stop it. You know how they are when they make up their mind. I do know, and now they'll know too because I'm not bending this time. I got into my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of my mother in the doorway, watching me leave. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the immediate urge to turn around and apologize for standing my ground. Instead, I felt something new and terrifying growing inside me, the determination to finally break free, whatever the cost. I don't remember much about the drive through Boston that night. My autopilot took over as I navigated familiar streets turned alien by the fog of shock surrounding me. Street lights blurred through tears I refused to let fall, at least until I was safely away from Beacon Hill and anyone who might report back to Alina and Richard Michaud that their daughter had been seen crying in her sensible, mid-range sedan. When I finally pulled over, I was in front of Revere Beach. The ocean stretched dark and endless before me, and only then did I let the first sob escape. 2 days, 48 to dismantle the fragile independence I'd built. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and called the one person who would understand without judgment. Kaitlyn, it's me, I need help. 20 minutes later, we sat in a 24 diner, the kind of place my mother would rather die than set foot in. My best friend since college listened as I poured out the entire humiliating story, her expression shifting from shock to outrage. They can't do this, she said, pushing a mug of hot chocolate toward me. It's emotional blackmail. They absolutely can, I corrected her, wrapping my cold hands around the warm ceramic. The lake house is their property. The money is theirs. I have no legal claim to any of it. But the timing, 2 days, is insane. Even landlords have to give proper notice. I laughed hollowly. I don't think landlord-tenant law applies to ungrateful daughters using the family vacation home. Kaitlyn reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Stay with me, my couch is yours for as long as you need it. I might need to take you up on that, at least temporarily. I have to get everything from the lake house first, though. I stared into the chocolate swirls in my mug. God, Kite, I have manuscripts there, research notes, my grandfather's typewriter. We'll rent a U-Haul. I'll call Marco and Steve to help. We'll get it all out. For the first time since dinner, I felt a tiny flicker of something other than panic. I wasn't alone. After midnight, I returned to my apartment, the one my parents considered barely a step up from homelessness, and truly looked at it through their eyes. It was small, yes, the building was old, the neighborhood transitional, according to real estate euphemisms. But it was mine. I'd chosen the mismatched furniture, hung the art, filled the bookshelves with novels and poetry collections rather than legal tomes. Sleep was impossible. I spent making lists instead, what needed to be retrieved from the lake house, what bills were in my name versus theirs, what income I could count on in the coming months. Each calculation made the knot in my stomach tighter. I'd been more dependent on them than I'd admitted to myself. They paid my phone bill, kept me on their family health insurance, covered the car insurance for my ancient Honda. Small things that added up to a safety net I'd taken for granted. As dawn broke, I finally drifted into restless sleep, only to jolt awake at 9 to the sound of my phone ringing. Not my parents, as I'd feared, but my agent Caroline. Amber, we have a situation with the travel series. The publication wants to move up the first deadline. Can you deliver the New England coastal piece by Friday instead of next Tuesday? I nearly laughed at the cosmic timing. Caroline, I'm actually in the middle of a personal emergency. My parents just cut me off financially and I have to clear out all my belongings from their property within 48. Silence on the line. Then, that's terrible timing. Look, I know you're in crisis mode, but this series is a big break. If you miss this deadline, they might reassign the whole project. The walls seemed to close in a little. I understand, I'll figure something out. After hanging up, I sat on my bed surrounded by half-formed packing plans and financial calculations, and for the first time, I considered giving in. Maybe law school wouldn't be so bad. Maybe living at home temporarily, swallowing my pride, playing by their rules, maybe that was the adult thing to do. The practical thing. I was still considering this when my phone dinged with a text from my mother. We expect your answer by tomorrow night. Your room is ready whenever you're ready, to be reasonable. Something about the presumption in that message, the certainty that I would break, that my independence was just a phase to be waited out, sparked something in me. I tossed the phone aside and began throwing clothes into a duffel bag. First priority, get to the lake house and save what mattered most. The 2-drive to the Berkshires gave me time to think. I called Kaitlyn again, confirming she could help tomorrow with the actual move. Then I called Wesley, whose guilt made him unusually forthcoming. They've been planning this for months, Ams, he admitted. Mom started redecorating your old room back in February. They were that certain I'd fail. His silence was answer enough. The lake house looked the same as it always had, a beautiful 3-bedroom cabin on the water that had been in our family for generations. I'd spent countless weekends here, first as a child learning to swim and canoe, then as a teen escaping the pressure of Boston, and most recently as a writer finding the quiet necessary to hear my own thoughts. I walked through each room, taking inventory. My laptop and current notebooks were at my apartment, thankfully, but there were boxes of old journals, drafts, research materials, books I'd collected, furniture I'd bought secondhand and refinished, clothes for different seasons, the vintage typewriter my grandfather had given me when I first expressed interest in writing, the one family member who had encouraged my creative pursuits before his death during my freshman year of college. It was overwhelming. I sat at the desk by the window overlooking the lake and put my head in my hands. That's when I saw a bank statement my father had apparently left behind during his last visit. I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me to unfold the paper. The numbers made me gasp. They had millions, far more than I'd realized, even knowing they were wealthy. The cruelty of cutting me off wasn't about money at all. They could have supported my writing career for decades without noticing the expense. This was purely about control. When I checked my phone, I discovered they'd already removed me from the family cell phone plan. Service was shut off. They hadn't wasted any time making good on their threats. Using the lake house Wi-Fi, I called my friend Derek, who worked as a financial advisor. I need to understand my actual financial situation, I explained after giving him the broad strokes. What should I be panicking about first? Derek was methodical and practical. Health insurance is priority one. You can get on an ACA plan during the special enrollment period since you're losing coverage. It won't be cheap, but it's essential. Next, set up your own phone plan. Then tackle the car insurance. One by one, we went through the necessities, creating a realistic budget that had me eating ramen for the foreseeable future but wouldn't leave me destitute. If I could deliver the travel pieces on time and pick up 2 more regular clients, I could survive. It would be tight, but possible. As I hung up, my laptop pinged with an email notification. A lifestyle magazine I'd pitched months ago was interested in a series of articles about reinventing yourself in your late 20s. The irony wasn't lost on me as I typed back an enthusiastic acceptance. That night, sorting through old journals, I found one from my sophomore year of college right after I'd discovered my love of writing. The entry was raw with excitement. I don't care if it's practical. I don't care if it makes me rich. When I write, I feel like I'm finally breathing after being underwater my whole life. I traced the words with my fingertip, remembering that feeling of awakening. I'd been chasing it ever since, even while accepting my parents' financial support as a compromise. But there had always been strings attached, invisible lines I couldn't cross without consequences. Maybe it was time to cut those strings myself. The thought was both terrifying and strangely freeing. Day 2 began with the harsh reality of physical labor. I'd slept on the couch at the lake house, too exhausted to even make up a proper bed. My back protested as I started sorting belongings into piles: keep, donate, trash. Every object required a decision, and every decision felt weighted with consequences I couldn't fully anticipate. Would I need these winter sweaters if I couldn't afford heat? Should I keep these books if I might have to downsize apartments? Was this furniture worth the storage costs if I had to move in with Kaitlyn temporarily? By noon, I was surrounded by half-filled boxes, my energy flagging as the enormity of the situation truly hit me. I hadn't heard from my parents since leaving their house. The Wesley had texted to check on me. I couldn't decide if their silence was a power play or genuine indifference to my plight. My phone, now with a new, more expensive individual plan, rang with Caroline's number. "Please tell me you're working on that coastal piece," she said without preamble. "I'm trying," I said, looking around at the chaos of my dismantled life. "I'm in the middle of moving everything I own. Amber, I don't think you understand. This publication doesn't care about your personal problem. They want copy by Friday or they'll find someone else who can deliver." "I understand perfectly," I snapped, my composure finally breaking. "But unless you want an article about how to pack up your life in 48 after your parents disown you, I need a little flexibility here." Silence. Then Caroline's voice, softer now. "I'll try to buy you until Monday. That's the absolute best I can do. But Amber, this is a career-making opportunity. Don't blow After hanging up, I sat on the floor amidst my belongings and finally allowed myself to cry properly, not the shocked tears of the previous night, but deep, body-shaking sobs that left me gasping. Everything was falling apart simultaneously. I had no safety net, looming deadlines, a career hanging by a thread, and decades of parental approval conditioning screaming at me to just give in, go home, follow their plan. For one weak moment, I picked up my phone and began composing a text to my father. "I've been thinking about your offer." My thumb hovered over the keyboard as I contemplated surrender. Then a text from an unknown number came through. "Miss Mishaw, this is Maria from the Lake House Cleaning Service. Mr. Mishaw asked me to confirm you'll be out by tomorrow morning. I'm so sorry about this situation." Maria had been cleaning the lake house since I was a child. She'd always left little notes of encouragement when she found my writing scattered on desks. The fact that my father was already checking up on me, making sure I complied with his timeline, sparked something inside me, not sadness now, but anger. I deleted the half-written surrender text and instead replied to Maria, "I'll be out. Thank you for all your kindness over the years." As I set down my phone, my gaze fell on an old journal I'd uncovered earlier, one I hadn't looked at in years. I opened it to a random page and found an entry from my senior year of high school, when I'd won a regional writing contest my parents had dismissed as irrelevant to college applications. I'd written, "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be brave enough to choose myself over their expectations. What would happen if I just said no to their plans for me? Would they stop loving me, or would they finally see me?" 10 years later, I had my answer. Their love had always been conditional, contingent on compliance, on following their blueprint, on being a reflection of their values rather than creating my own. I closed the journal and took a deep breath. Then I reached for my laptop and opened the document for the coastal travel piece. If I worked through the night, I could get a draft done between packing. I couldn't control my parents' actions, but I could control mine. And I chose to fight for my career rather than abandon it. That evening, as sunset painted the lake in gold and crimson, I took a break from packing to call my old writing professor, Dr. Abigail Harris. She'd been a mentor during college and had kept in touch sporadically since. "It sounds like they've shown their true colors," she said after I explained the situation. "It hurts now, but there's clarity in that." "Clarity doesn't pay the bills," I said ruefully. "No, but it informs your path forward. Amber, do you remember what I told you in your senior seminar about the difference between talented writers and successful ones?" I did remember. Talented writers create beautiful work. Successful writers persist through the ugly parts. Exactly. This is an ugly part. But it doesn't define your story unless you let it. After our call, I looked around at the boxes and bags, the physical manifestation of my parents' ultimatum. They thought this moment would break me, force me back into their narrow definition of success. Instead, it was crystallizing something that had been forming in me for years, the understanding that their approval would always require sacrificing my authentic self, and no amount of financial security was worth that price. I opened my laptop again and created a detailed inventory of my resources, skills I could monetize, contacts in publishing, friends who might help, actual savings meager but existing. I set up calendar alerts for bill payment dates, created a bare-bones budget, and drafted emails to potential new clients. The work was tedious, unsexy, and terrifying but also empowering. With each spreadsheet cell I filled, I reclaimed another piece of my independence from those who would use money to control me. When Kylan arrived the next morning with the rented truck and 2 mutual friends to help load it, I greeted them with red-rimmed eyes but genuine determination. "Welcome to Operation Independence," I said, handing out coffee cups. "Let's get this done." The lake house clean-out was both physically and emotionally exhausting. Every object held memories, every decision felt weighted with consequence. Kylan and our friends worked tirelessly, packing and loading the U-Haul, while I sorted through what mattered most. Maria, the housekeeper, arrived midday. "I'm not supposed to be here until tomorrow," she whispered, glancing nervously at her car as though expecting my parents to appear. "But I thought you might need help." She slipped me a box of family photos I'd displayed on the mantel, images my parents would likely have discarded in their rush to erase my presence. "Your grandfather would be proud of you," she said softly. "He never believed in forcing people into boxes they didn't fit." Her small act of rebellion against my parents touched me deeply. It was the first indication that others might see through their concerned parents' facade to the control beneath. We finished loading just as sunset painted the lake in familiar golds and purples. I stood on the dock one last time, saying goodbye not just to the property but to the security it represented. The girl who had come here seeking refuge no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, if more wounded. The first week at Kitelands was chaos. Most of my belongings went into a storage unit I could barely afford, while I slept on her pull-out couch and tried to meet my writing deadline. The coastal travel piece was submitted just under the wire, and Caroline's grudging, "This is actually quite good," felt like a massive victory. 10 days after the fateful dinner, I received the first contact from my parents, a terse email from my father. "Amber, we notice you haven't collected your remaining possessions from the house. Please arrange to pick up your childhood items by the end of the month, or they will be donated. Also, your mother needs your new contact information for the family holiday card list. We trust you've had time to reconsider our offer. Your law school application can still be submitted for the January semester." The breathtaking presumption that I would break, that my independence was a temporary tantrum, ignited something in me. I forwarded the email to Wesley with a single question. Did they seriously expect me to give in already? His response was illuminating. "They had a bet. Dad said you'd last 2 weeks, Mom said 1. They've already redecorated your room with law school brochures." The knowledge that they had been so certain of my failure was both painful and clarifying. This wasn't love, it was ownership. And I was done being owned. I threw myself into work with renewed determination, pitching articles to new publications and taking on additional copywriting gigs that paid less than I wanted but kept the lights on. My tiny emergency fund dwindled as I covered the security deposit for my own health insurance plan. At each bill I paid myself felt like reclaiming another piece of my life. 2 weeks in, an unexpected ally appeared. Wesley showed up at Kitelands' apartment with boxes from our parents' house. I told them I was taking these to Goodwill, he admitted, helping me carry in containers filled with my childhood journals, awards, and mementos. "But I thought you might want them." We sat on Kitelands' fire escape drinking beer as the sun set over Somerville. "They really thought I'd break," I said, not a question. Wesley looked uncomfortable. "They don't understand you, Ams. They never have. You were always different. Different bad, different brave," he clarified. "I've always envied that about you. You know who you are." "Do I? Because most days I feel like I'm drowning, but you're swimming in your own direction." "I'm just floating wherever their current takes me." His admission shocked me. Perfect Wesley, the golden child fulfilling the Michelle destiny, was envious of my struggle. It reframed our family dynamic in ways I hadn't considered. As week 3 of independence began, my parents escalated their pressure. They enlisted aunts, uncles, and family friends to check on me, transparent flying monkeys dispatched to report back and apply pressure. "Your parents only want what's best for you." My Aunt Susan insisted over coffee she'd insisted on buying me, clearly briefed on my financial situation. "No," I corrected her, "they want what they think is best for them, a daughter who validates their life choices by duplicating them." Each flying monkey was met with the same boundary. I would not discuss my relationship with my parents through intermediaries. Each time I held this line, I felt stronger. The professional breakthrough came unexpectedly. My travel piece was published and immediately went viral. Apparently people connected with my description of finding home within yourself rather than in a physical place. The publication immediately commissioned 3 additional articles at a higher rate. For the first time, I could pay all my bills without dipping into savings. I found a tiny studio apartment in Jamaica Plain, not as convenient as Somerville, but affordable without roommate. The day I signed the lease, I felt a surge of accomplishment that no law school acceptance could have matched. It was time to address my parents directly. After careful consideration, I crafted an email that set clear boundaries without burning bridges entirely. Mom and Dad, I'm writing to establish clarity about our relationship moving forward. I will not be returning to live at home or attending law school. My writing career is progressing well, and I'm financially independent. I value family, but not at the expense of my autonomy or authenticity. If you wish to have a relationship with me, it must be based on mutual respect for our different paths. I will not discuss my career choices or finances with you further. Those topics are now off limits. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship on these new terms, starting with occasional phone calls if you feel ready to respect these boundaries. My new contact information is below. The choice to use it respectfully is yours. Amber, my father's response came within a cold, formal message stating that my decision to reject family guidance was noted and that they would be here when you come to your senses. My mother's message arrived separately, a masterwork of manipulation highlighting how much my selfishness was hurting the family and causing your father's blood pressure to rise dangerously. It ended with, "We pray you'll remember who you really are." I didn't respond to either message. Instead, I hung pictures in my new apartment, tiny as it was, and finished an article about finding your voice amid family expectations. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 weeks after the ultimatum dinner, Wesley arranged a meeting at a neutral coffee shop. My parents had finally accepted that I wasn't crawling back and wanted to discuss moving forward. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The meeting was tense. My father, looking older somehow, attempted to establish the same authoritative tone he'd used all my life. "We've been patient with this experiment of yours," he began. "But it's time to be practical." "I am being practical," I replied calmly. "I'm paying my bills, building my career, and living authentically." "Living in a closet-sized apartment is hardly success," my mother sniffed. "Success isn't measured by square footage, Mom. It's measured by whether you can look at yourself in the mirror without flinching." For the first time, I saw something flicker across my father's face, not anger or disappointment, but surprise, perhaps even a reluctant respect. "You've always been stubborn," he said, but without the usual edge. "I prefer to call it determined," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I learned it from you, actually. We didn't solve everything that day. They still didn't understand my choices, and I still didn't trust their motives. But something had shifted. They had expected me to crumble without their support, and I hadn't. That reality forced them to see me differently, not as a rebellious child but as an adult making her own way, however imperfectly." As I left the coffee shop, my mother caught my arm. "The holidays are coming up," she said stiffly. "Will you be joining us for Thanksgiving?" It was as close to an olive branch as she could manage. I considered the question carefully. "I'll come for dessert," I offered, a compromise that maintained my boundaries while acknowledging her effort. "But we're not discussing my career or finances. Those topics are still off limits." She pressed her lips together but nodded. It was a beginning. 6 months after my parents delivered their ultimatum, I stood in my new apartment, still small by their standards but perfect for me, hanging a framed copy of my first magazine cover story. The piece about finding home within yourself had resonated so strongly with readers that the editor had commissioned a series, culminating in this feature. I studioed in Jamaica Plain had slowly transformed from a bare-bones emergency housing solution into a genuine home. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with the volumes I'd rescued from the lake house. My grandfather's typewriter held place of honor on a vintage desk I'd found at a thrift store. The walls featured framed copies of my published work alongside art from local creators I'd met through Kiteland. Nothing matched. Nothing was expensive. Everything was chosen with intention rather than to impress others. For perhaps the first time in my life, my surroundings truly reflected who I was rather than who someone else thought I should be. My professional life had found a similar authenticity. After the travel series' success, I'd secured a contract for a book of essays about redefining success in one's 20s. The advance wasn't life-changing, but combined with my regular freelance work, it kept me financially independent. I'd even started putting small amounts into a retirement account, a practical step that would have pleased my father if I'd been inclined to tell him about it, which I wasn't. Our relationship with Wesley had deepened in unexpected ways. Freed from our prescribed roles as golden boy and disappointment, we'd discovered a genuine friendship. He confessed during one of our regular dinners that he was considering a switch from cardiology to pediatrics, following his own passion rather than our father's expectations. I'd never been prouder of him. "How did Mom and Dad take it?" I'd asked. "Better than expected," he'd admitted. "I think you softened the ground for me. After you stood your ground, they realized they could either adapt or lose both their children." With my parents themselves, the relationship remained complicated but was slowly evolving. We'd established a wary truce at Thanksgiving, which had led to a Christmas dinner where politics and careers remained off the table as topics. By Valentine's Day, my mother had managed to visit my apartment without more than one backhanded compliment about its size. By Easter, my father had asked to read one of my published pieces, and his gruff, "not bad," afterward felt like high praise indeed. The transformation wasn't just external. Inside, I discovered a strength I hadn't known. I possessed the ability to stand alone, to weather disapproval from those whose opinion had once been my whole world, to build a life on my terms. Caitlin, who'd been my rock throughout the crisis, sprawled on my second-hand couch during our weekly wine night. "Remember when you thought your life was over?" she asked, refilling our glasses. "Look at you now." My life wasn't over, I reflected, but a version of me was the version that needed their approval to feel worthy. The most unexpected development had come through a writing workshop I'd joined to connect with other creatives in the city. There I'd met David, a graphic novelist whose quiet confidence and genuine interest in my work had slowly evolved into something more. Unlike the corporate types my parents had always pushed me toward, David understood the creative drive, the need to make something meaningful rather than just profitable. "You know what's weird?" I told him one evening as we walked along the Charles River. "If my parents hadn't cut me off, I might never have found out who I really am." Their ultimatum was actually a gift in disguise. "The best revenge is living well," he replied, squeezing my hand. And I was living well not by my parents' definition but by my own. Each month, my financial situation became a little more secure. Each publication built my professional reputation a little stronger. Each boundary I maintained helped heal the people-pleasing patterns I developed over decades. The most profound moment of resolution came unexpectedly. During a Sunday dinner my parents had tentatively begun hosting again. As we sat in the formal dining room where the ultimatum had been delivered 6 months earlier, my mother mentioned a family friend whose daughter had just been accepted to law school. In the past, this would have been a pointed barb, a reminder of my failure to follow the approved path. I braced myself for the comparison, the subtle dig, the reopening of old wounds. Instead, my mother simply continued, "She's very excited, of course. Law runs in their family just like writing seems to run in ours now." The casual acknowledgement of my career as valid, as a path rather than a phase, left me momentarily speechless. My father, caching my expression, cleared his throat. "We saw your article in the airport bookstore," he said gruffly. "In Boston, and New York too, apparently." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even particularly effusive praise, but it was recognition, acknowledgement that the path I'd chosen had merit they could begin to see later. Helping my mother clear dishes, she paused with plates in hand. "Are you happy, Amber?" Truly, the question held no judgment, no hidden agenda that I could detect. Just a mother's genuine concern. "I am," I answered honestly. "Not every day. Some days are still scary. But I'm happy in a way I never could have been following someone else's blueprint for my life." She nodded slowly. "Your father and I only wanted security for you. We never intended." "I know," I said, sparing her the need to articulate what we both understood. "But security without authenticity isn't really living. The relationship remains a work in progress. Old patterns emerge in moments of stress. Boundaries require regular maintenance. But the fundamental dynamic has shifted from ownership to relationship, from control to connection, however imperfect." The ultimatum that was meant to break me instead forced me to build something stronger, a life constructed around my own values rather than inherited ones. The journey from that shocking dinner to my current reality taught me that conditional love isn't really love at all, and that sometimes the most loving choice you can make is to disappoint those who cannot see you clearly. If you're facing your own version of that terrible dinner, that impossible choice between authenticity and approval, I want you to know this: the path of authenticity is harder in the short term, but infinitely more rewarding in the end. Building a life on your own terms isn't selfish, it's the bravest, most honest thing you can do. Have you ever had to choose between someone else's expectations and your own truth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more conversations about finding your authentic path. Remember, the family you create through friendship and mutual respect can be just as meaningful as the one you were born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always have the courage to write your own.